the same soul. Spiral. You wake up with a feeling you can't explain. A strange heaviness or a familiarity that wraps itself around your chest like fog. You were just dreaming. But it wasn't this life. It was a life. Another one. A face in the mirror that wasn't yours, but somehow was. And the people? The place? It's like remembering the lyrics to a song you've never heard before. You try to shake it, but it lingers. And somewhere deep in the silence, a thought rises. Have I done all this before? This is the same soul spiral, the eerie, cyclical sense that you're not moving forward through lives, but around and around the same emotional landscape, in different costumes, under different skies. The settings change, the names, the faces, but the lessons, the wounds, the patterns, they stay. Repeating, repeating. We like to believe reincarnation is linear, that we graduate, improve, climb ladders of morality or wisdom until we reach some final, enlightened peak. But what if it isn't like that at all? What if the soul doesn't move forward, but inward? What if it spins in spirals, circling around the same unresolved truths again and again, until something finally breaks? The dream you had of being someone else, a merchant, a mother, a soldier, a thief, it wasn't fantasy. It was echo, your soul retracing steps, revisiting questions it still doesn't know how to answer. You felt the grief, not because it was powerful, but because it was familiar. You've worn that loss before, carried it like a name. The spiral doesn't always show up in dreams. Sometimes it's in your waking life. You find yourself drawn to the same kinds of people. You sabotage your own success in the same way every time. You feel a pull toward certain cultures, certain eras, certain tragedies. And it doesn't make sense until you imagine that your soul is circling back to a lesson it once avoided. Again and again. It's not punishment. It's pattern. And patterns don't break through knowledge. They break through awareness. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, I thought I was past this? How many moments have felt like déjà vu, not because you remembered the past, but because you recognized the spiral, the curve of the return, the emotional geometry of your own unfinished becoming? Some people report remembering past lives only to realize they ended the same way. Alone, misunderstood, unresolved, different details, same wound. That's not coincidence. That's the spiral. The soul doesn't care about chronology. It cares about truth. And if the truth is still buried, the spiral continues. But here's the paradox. The spiral isn't always visible. You don't remember most of your past lives. You don't see the circle. You feel it as resistance, as longing, as an itch under the skin of your existence. Sometimes, in moments of silence or sorrow or sleep, it flashes before you. A pattern so ancient, so precise, it takes your breath away. You see your current life not as random, but as one point on a spiral that stretches through lifetimes, shaped by questions you've been asking for centuries without words. The same soul. Spiral isn't cruel. It's invitational. It loops not to trap you, but to invite awareness. Each time you return to the lesson, you meet it with a new lens, a new body, a new crack in the shell of your forgetting. And one day, maybe in this life, maybe in the next, you won't react the way you always have. You'll pause. You'll breathe. You'll respond differently. And just like that, the spiral shifts. Not outward, but deeper. Not because you've escaped it, but because you've entered it fully. And that is the strange mercy of the spiral. It doesn't let you leave until you've come home to something real. So, if life feels like a loop, if the dream feels too familiar, if the lesson keeps knocking in different disguises, don't turn away. You are not stuck. You are circling. And one turn, just one, could change the shape of your soul forever. The familiar, stranger illusion. You're walking through a dream, or maybe it's waking life, and you lock eyes with someone, just for a moment. Maybe they're crossing the street, sitting across from you on a train, ordering coffee 2 steps ahead, and something inside you stirs. Not attraction, not fear, but recognition. Like a thread was pulled. Like you've met before in another place, under another sky, but the face is unfamiliar, the name unknown. Still, something in your chest whispers, I know you. This is the familiar, stranger illusion, the haunting sense that certain people are echoes, returning in new bodies, brushing briefly against the edges of your path. It doesn't make sense. You've never spoken. You don't know where they're from. And yet, in that flash of presence, your whole nervous system wakes up. Sometimes it's warm, like comfort. Sometimes it's cold, like unfinished business. But always, it feels bigger than coincidence. What if it is? In many spiritual traditions, souls travel in groups, lifetimes interwoven. You love someone in one life, and in the next, they return, not as lover, but as friend. Not as friend, but as rival. Not to repeat the same story, but to deepen it, to resolve something left hanging, to teach something only they can teach you. Again. But not all meetings last. Sometimes the connection is fleeting. A glance, a smile, a tension that never finds a voice. And afterward, you wonder, what was that? Why do they feel like a memory I couldn't place? That's the illusion. The mind scrambles to explain. Maybe they reminded me of someone. Maybe I was just tired. But the feeling persists. A shimmer around their image. A phrase that repeats. Sometimes they show up in your dreams, after the encounter. Sometimes they feel like the dream itself. You may dream of a stranger you love deeply, only to meet their eyes years later in a crowd. You may dream of someone who hurts you, only to find that wound mirrored in a new relationship. The roles shift. The costumes change. But the soul beneath, the signature, remains. These encounters don't always bring clarity. In fact, most bring questions. Why now? Why them? What am I supposed to do with this feeling? But perhaps the point is not to act. Perhaps the point is to witness, to feel the strange web of connections that stretch beyond what we can measure, to know that you're not alone in your soul's journey, that there are others moving alongside you, even if their path only touches yours for seconds. Some familiar strangers carry softness, a reminder of something kind, a version of love that didn't end in pain. Others carry tension, a discomfort you can't trace, like meeting someone you once betrayed, or who once betrayed you. Not in this life, but in some life. The illusion, then, is not that they're familiar. The illusion is that we think we can explain it, that logic should govern these moments. But dreams don't work like that, and neither does the soul. You may never see them again. You may never learn their name. But their presence does something. It stirs memory. It reawakens patterns. It reminds you of how deep your story really runs. Far deeper than one body, one timeline, one lifetime. And if you do meet again, if paths cross more than once, if the connection deepens, then you'll feel it, like stepping into a room you've already decorated in some forgotten dream. You won't know what comes next, but you'll know this isn't new. So when you meet a stranger and your chest tightens, don't rush to rationalize it. Sit with it. Ask, what part of me remembers them? What chapter of my soul is flickering open in their presence? Because sometimes the most powerful people in our lives are not the ones who stay. They are the ones who remind us, if only for a moment, of the story that began long before we were born. The backward reincarnation. Trap. We like to imagine that reincarnation moves forward, life to life, lesson to lesson, progressing like the pages of a book we're slowly learning to read. But what if that's not how it works at all? What if, in some strange twist of soul time, we can be reborn not ahead, but behind, into the past, into older worlds, into timelines long buried beneath the dust of history? This is the unsettling possibility of the backward reincarnation trap, where the soul doesn't ascend to higher levels, but cycles in reverse, pulled back into unfinished echoes. You dream of firelight and clay walls, of cities that no longer exist, yet feel like home. You see your hands, but they are worn differently. You speak words from a language you've never learned. It's not nostalgia, it's residence. The dream doesn't feel like imagination. It feels like returning. You wake with dirt under your thoughts, memories caked in ancient silence. Most people dismiss this. Dreams of the past are just past life memories, they say. But what if they aren't memories? What if they're transmissions from lives still unfolding, not behind us, but beneath us, existing parallel to now? What if time, from the soul's perspective, isn't linear, but layered? What if the soul moves not forward through time, but through meaning, looping, folding, skipping, reversing? Some spiritual theories suggest that souls can choose to reincarnate into earlier time periods, to revisit a context where a particular lesson can be more vividly lived. Maybe you were born in 2020, but your next incarnation lands in 1850, or 1300, or before calendars existed. You experience war not as history, but as breath. You walk through a village that, in your current life, is nothing but ruins. And it feels familiar, not as myth, but as method. But the trap comes in this. If reincarnation can move backward, can the soul become stuck in regressions? Can we loop endlessly through the same cycles, not just emotionally, but historically? What if you've already lived the 21st century 1,000 times, but keep choosing to return to the 17th, unable to release something left undone? The backward trap isn't about punishment. It's about entanglement. The soul returns to earlier timelines, not because it's being forced, but because part of it is still there, still locked in the shape of an unfinished grief, a betrayal unresolved, a silence unbroken. The timeline isn't pulling you back. You're pulling yourself toward it. Dreams are where we sometimes catch this in motion. You wake from a dream where you were someone else, speaking to someone who hasn't existed in centuries. And when you look into their eyes, you feel it. You chose this. You needed to go back, not to suffer, but to retrieve a part of yourself that couldn't move forward until now. But the danger, the trap, is staying, getting lost in the comfort of repetition, finding refuge in the known pain of the past, because the uncertainty of the future feels too raw. The soul, like any system, prefers stability. And time, even when looping, offers the illusion of direction. The trap is in forgetting that backward doesn't mean wrong, but it also doesn't mean growth. So how do you know if you're caught? You dream of the same historical settings over and over. You find yourself obsessed with eras you shouldn't feel connected to. You feel more alive in imagined centuries than in the one you're living. And beneath it all, there's a pull, a weight, a sense that you're still answering a question, no longer being asked. The backward reincarnation trap is subtle. It doesn't scream. It seduces. With familiarity, with purpose, with echoes dressed as destiny. But you're not here to repeat. You're here to remember, to retrieve, to reintegrate. The soul doesn't need to escape the past. It needs to unfold through it, until the pattern becomes visible, until the loop becomes a spiral. So if your dreams carry the weight of centuries, don't resist. But don't get lost. Ask, what part of me still lives there? And what part of me is ready to come home? Because even backward motion, if met with awareness, can become a return, not to the past, but to yourself. The genetic reflection echo. You catch your own reflection in a window, not a mirror, not staged, just a moment. And something about the angle, the lighting, the quietness, makes your breath stop. You don't recognize yourself. Or rather, you do. But not from this life, not from this moment. There's someone else in that glance, a flicker, a resonance, and it leaves you still. This is the genetic reflection echo, the haunting idea that within your body lives the memory of faces long gone, gestures once repeated in entirely different times, in different skin. We inherit more than eye color, more than height or laugh lines. We inherit patterns, emotional rhythms, subtle tics of movement and memory that don't feel entirely like ours. You may tilt your head a certain way when thinking. You may clench your jaw during silence. You may walk with a sway that no one taught you. These aren't quirks. They're codes, passed down, echoed, layered. Some people speak of ancestral memory, a dream of war when you've never seen one, a sorrow that doesn't match your biography. You wake with tears for someone else's loss. You flinch at sounds you shouldn't fear. And deep in the body, a knowing pulses. This has happened before. Not to me, but through me. The genetic echo doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it slips in quietly, like déjà vu without context. You visit a place you've never been, and your body relaxes, as if remembering the ground. You hold a tool in your hand for the first time and use it with an ease that surprises you. You speak a word in a language you've never studied, and it feels like home. But it's not just ancestral. What if the echo doesn't stop at lineage? What if the soul, in its many incarnations, leaves traces in the body as well? A certain curve in the spine, a reaction to betrayal, a deep, persistent fear of drowning. Not born from this life, but carried forward like a hidden watermark, barely visible until the right light finds it. This is where dreams become strange. You look into a mirror in sleep, and the face is yours, but not yours. Slightly altered, eyes deeper, hair unfamiliar. You smile, and the expression unnerves you. And yet, it feels closer to something real. You wake and carry that face with you, not as a distortion, but as a layer, another self, folded into this one. The genetic reflection. Echo is not science, though science may one day explain it. It is resonance, the soul remembering itself through the scaffolding of DNA, the past peeking through in glances, in gestures, in griefs that don't belong to this chapter. You may never prove it, but you'll feel it. In the moment you comfort someone in a language you don't speak, in the song that breaks your heart without a lyric, in the mirror when your own eyes feel older than your years. And perhaps that's the point, not to trace it, but to honor it. To know that your body is not just a shell, but a vessel, carrying echoes of those who loved, who failed, who tried, who lived before you. And maybe echoes of yourself. So the next time you pause at your own reflection and feel something ancient, look back. Don't blink away. Ask, what story is your body still trying to finish? And what part of you, across lifetimes, across bloodlines, is still speaking beneath the surface? Not to haunt you, but to remind you you've been here before, and you're not alone inside your skin. The glimpse loop effect. It happens in a blink. You see something, and for a fraction of a second, your soul jolts. I've seen this before. A hallway, a sentence, the exact rhythm of a laugh. You pause, startled. It's not memory. It's preview. And then, just as quickly, it vanishes. The world resumes its normal pace. You shake it off, but the residue remains. What just happened wasn't déjà vu. It was a glimpse. And this is the glimpse loop effect. Those uncanny flashes of recognition that feel like echoes from the future, replaying themselves in loops so tight, they slip between the cracks of time. We tend to think of time as a straight line. Events unfold. Past stays behind us. Future waits ahead. But in these moments, brief, quiet, irreducible, that belief collapses. You know the moment before it happens. You feel it click. The color, the sound, the texture of it. It's too precise to be imagined, too mundane to be invented. Dreamers report these glimpses frequently. A dream of a place, and weeks later they walk into it in waking life. A conversation replayed exactly as it was dreamt. tone, setting, sequence. You don't think it could happen. Then it does. Not as magic, not as revelation, but as confirmation. You've been here before. In sleep, you've looped. But here's the unsettling part. It doesn't only happen once. Some people dream the same moment dozens of times across years before it finally unfolds. Others revisit the same symbol, a staircase, a scar, a falling glass, again and again, each time with more detail, more clarity. The moment approaches like a wave, first subtle, then rising, then crashing into the present. And the question arises, why? Why would the soul send us these glimpses? Why loop a single moment through multiple dreams, only to deliver it quietly into life? Perhaps to prepare us, perhaps to anchor us, or perhaps to test whether we're awake enough to notice. The glimpse loop effect suggests that time, at the level of soul consciousness, isn't fixed. It bends. And dreams are where that bending becomes visible. You're not seeing the future. You're touching it. Like reaching through gauze to feel the shape of something not yet born. Sometimes these glimpses are comforting. A child's voice, a sunset, a meeting you know will change you. Other times, they carry weight. A warning, an argument, a mistake you haven't made yet, but could. The loop doesn't force outcomes. It whispers them, and it asks, what will you do with this echo when it becomes real? There's danger in chasing these glimpses, in obsessing, in trying to turn dreams into blueprints, because the future, once seen, begins to change. The act of noticing alters the loop. It's not prediction, it's invitation. The dream says, here is a moment that matters. Prepare your soul for it. And when it arrives, you'll know. Not with drama, but with stillness. As if the universe has taken a breath and held it just for you. And you'll remember, not because it's dramatic, but because it's familiar. Because this isn't the first time you've stood here, or spoken those words, or looked into those eyes. You looped, quietly, carefully, so you'd be ready. So when the glimpse becomes real, you'll choose differently, or notice more, or simply pause long enough to feel the echo and smile. Because this time, you're awake. So the next time a dream flashes something small, but piercing, a gesture, a place, a second, don't shrug it off. Write it down. Let it echo. Because one day, that moment may arrive. And when it does, you'll remember the future you once dreamt. The unread chapter. Paradox. You wake from a dream with a feeling, not fear, not confusion, but incompletion. As if you closed a book mid-sentence. You try to remember, but the details won't come. You sense that something important was there, just beyond the edge of recall. A moment, a truth, a decision. But it's gone, and the feeling remains. Something in that dream belonged to me, but I missed it. This is the unread chapter paradox, the strange, recurring sense that our dreams contain pages we were meant to live, but somehow skipped. We often think of our lives as linear narratives, chapters unfolding in order. But in dreams, the story frays, loops, folds, and sometimes an entire scene unfolds with a gravity we don't understand until after waking. You're talking to someone who feels central to your story. You're inside a place that holds weight. A decision is about to be made, and then you wake. The page turns before you're ready, and the question remains, What did I miss? The paradox lies here. These chapters feel both forgotten and unwritten, as though they existed but were never meant to be fully revealed. You feel the shape of them, the tone, the emotional echo, but not the content. And sometimes, that absence stays with you longer than any vivid dream. Some dreamers report recurring scenes that always end too soon, a train that never arrives, a letter that dissolves in their hands, a voice that speaks, but no words are heard. These aren't failures of memory. They're fragments of meaning that exist on the edge of integration, and that's what makes them so powerful. The unread chapter. Paradox suggests something humbling, that not all of your life is meant to be understood at once. Some parts remain behind the curtain, hidden, not to torment, but to ripen. They will return, not as repetition, but as rhythm, a deeper pattern. The soul doesn't forget. It waits. In waking life, we feel this too. You meet someone and feel like there's more between you than words can hold. You feel the ghost of a conversation you never had. You walk through a place and sense a story already lived, but never told. These moments aren't imagination. They're bleed-throughs, echoes of unread chapters still writing themselves inside you. And sometimes, the dream isn't showing you the past or future. It's showing you a version of now you refuse to live, a truth you avoided, a path you turned from. And when it shows up in your dream, unfinished and unresolved, it's not accusing you. It's inviting you back. But what do we do with chapters we can't remember? How do we honor the scenes that slipped through our fingers? We listen. We pay attention to what lingers, not the images, but the impression, the tension in your chest, the unresolved gesture, the phrase you almost spoke. These are not just dream residue. They are the margins of pages that haven't yet turned. You're still living toward them. And one day, without warning, the dream may return. The figure reappears. The door you never opened is waiting. And this time, something shifts. A word is spoken. A hand is held. The chapter continues, because no page is truly lost, only delayed. So if you wake with that ache, that sense of almost knowing, almost remembering, don't rush to dismiss it. It means the story is still alive. It means there's a part of you still reading ahead in the dark, waiting for the day when the dream returns and the sentence finally finishes itself in you. The infinite childhood cycle. You dream you're a child again, but not just younger. You're younger than memory. You're moving through a house you haven't seen in years, touching furniture that hasn't existed in decades, toys, wallpaper, songs, faces that used to look down at you with kindness or confusion. The feeling isn't nostalgic. It's raw, unfiltered. You're not revisiting childhood. You're inhabiting it, living through it again, as though it never ended. This is the infinite childhood cycle. The mysterious way the psyche seems to loop endlessly through our earliest, most formative states, as if they never truly ended when we grew up. In the waking world, childhood ends. We leave school. We grow taller. We move on. But in dreams, it returns, over and over. You become small again, vulnerable, curious, or wounded in a way that adulthood never quite acknowledged. And the details are uncanny. The way the floor creaked, the scent of your old blanket, the exact tone your father used when calling your name. These aren't reconstructions. They're replays, or perhaps continuations. Because what if childhood, on the soul's level, doesn't move forward? What if it spins? What if the child within you isn't a memory, but a living fragment, waiting for integration? The infinite childhood cycle isn't about reliving happy moments. It's often the opposite. You find yourself again at the moment you felt most powerless, most alone. A scene you've buried, dressed in symbolic skin. You're back in the school hallway, or under the table during an argument, or looking out the window, wondering why no one's listening. And here's the paradox. The dream doesn't always offer resolution. It loops. You try to say something, but your voice disappears. You try to leave, but the door resets. You wake up feeling 10 years old again, in all the ways that ache. Why? Because that version of you is unfinished. The emotional energy of those early moments still lives in your nervous system, in your reflexes, in your patterns. And the dream becomes the only place where the child can come forward and ask to be seen. Sometimes the dream gifts you another path. You speak the words you couldn't speak back then. You're held in the way you always needed. You feel a moment of joy so pure, it breaks something open. And when you wake, you're not just remembering, you're healing. You've moved one step forward in the spiral of return. This cycle is not a trap. It's a bridge between your current self and the one who formed before language, the one who knew how to wonder, who hadn't yet learned how to hide. That child isn't lost. They're dreaming, too, through you. You may find that certain places in waking life trigger the loop. A childhood photo, a specific kind of light, the sound of your own name said a certain way. You may even feel yourself slipping, not regressing, but returning to the emotional logic of the child within. Not because you're broken, but because part of you is trying to be remembered. And in that, there is immense power. Because the child remembers things the adult forgot, how to feel without apology, how to question without fear, how to cry and then laugh without shame or delay. So if your dreams return again and again to the rooms of your early years, don't push them away. Step through the door. Let the child speak. Let them show you what still hurts, what still hopes, what still is. Because that cycle you keep dreaming, it's not a loop of weakness. It's the soul's quiet way of saying, before you grow into anything else, come back and bring your child with you. The karma misplacement loop. You're dreaming of being blamed for something you didn't do, a war you didn't start, a betrayal you don't remember committing. The people around you are certain. Their anger is real. You try to speak, but your voice is swallowed. You feel the weight of guilt, but the source is invisible. You wake up carrying a shame that isn't yours, a sorrow you can't trace. This is the karma misplacement loop, the strange phenomenon where karmic consequence seems to land on the wrong soul, in the wrong life, as if something got rerouted in the great machinery of reincarnation. In theory, karma is simple: cause and effect, action and consequence. The soul plants seeds and later reaps the fruit, good or bitter, depending on the intention. But what happens when the wrong field is harvested? When the fruit of someone else's action is handed to you in dreams or in waking life? You feel the burden, but not the origin. You pay for a debt with no memory of the transaction. This karmic confusion isn't always metaphorical. People dream of suffering that feels inherited, guilt with no explanation. They see themselves as cruel in one lifetime and kind in the next. But the pain persists, misaligned. They do good, yet dream of punishment. They seek peace, yet wake from dreams of war. Somewhere, the equation doesn't add up. The loop begins when the soul forgets, but the residue remains. Some traditions speak of soul entanglement, how certain karmic threads bind not to action, but to association. You weren't the hand that harmed, but you stood close. You were the witness, the enabler, or simply in the orbit, and the karma, unsure of direction, spills. It lands in the next life, not precisely, but proximally. And sometimes it lands in the wrong hands. You may find yourself drawn to right a wrong you never committed, driven to serve, to apologize, to carry something that your current life cannot explain. The loop isn't punishment, it's displacement, an echo looking for its origin, and finding you instead. This also appears in relationships. You dream of a person you've never met and feel deep conflict, love entangled with resentment, blame without context. In waking life, you meet someone new and feel instantly responsible for their pain. You can't place it, but the dream returns, a memory you don't own, a scar you didn't earn. What if this isn't dysfunction? What if it's repair? The karma misplacement loop might not be a flaw in the system. It might be a hidden grace. The soul, recognizing a wound in the lineage, volunteers to carry what was left unresolved, not as punishment, but as offering, to absorb, to transmute, to prevent the pattern from continuing. And yet, there's danger. When we carry karma that doesn't belong to us, we begin to internalize stories that distort who we are. We call it weakness, guilt, unworthiness. But it's not ours. It's assigned. And if we're not careful, we build identities around someone else's echo. So how do we break the loop? We dream consciously. We listen to the feeling beneath the blame. If the sorrow feels familiar but foreign, we ask, is this mine? Or am I holding it for someone who never got to release it? The answer rarely comes in words. It comes in relief, in release. You may find that certain dreams repeat until you acknowledge the misplacement. You forgive someone you never met. You weep for a child who wasn't yours. You speak aloud, "This is not mine to carry." And the loop softens, not vanishes, but frees space. And sometimes the dream hands you a gift. You see the one who actually caused the harm. You meet them. You recognize them, not with anger, but with clarity. The story corrects itself. The blame returns home. So if you wake with burdens that don't belong to your biography, pause. Ask your soul, who is this for? What thread am I untangling in sleep that the world has forgotten in daylight? Because karma isn't about fairness. It's about completion. And sometimes completion begins with the realization that what you're holding was never meant to be yours. The identity mix-up effect. You're in a dream, but you're not you. You look into a mirror, and the face is unfamiliar. You speak, and the voice isn't yours. You move through the world with memories that don't belong to this life, but they're vivid, lived in, emotionally anchored. You know where things are in this dream city. You remember the way someone held your hand, though you've never met them, and you don't feel like a visitor. You feel like this is who you've always been, until you wake, and the dissonance sets in. This is the identity mix-up effect, a deep, disorienting dream phenomenon where the self rearranges, and you find yourself being someone else, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but directly, authentically, as if, for the length of that dream, you were another incarnation. And now you're back, struggling to reconcile the fracture. It doesn't happen in every dream. And when it does, it's not always easy to detect. Sometimes the change is subtle. You notice your hands are older. You have children, but you don't in waking life. You're grieving something that hasn't happened. The world around you reacts to you differently. And deep in your chest, there's no question. I am not the me I thought I was. Some dreamers describe entire lives, lived in a single night. Years pass. People grow old. Stories unfold. You wake up sweating, exhausted, overwhelmed. Not because it was fantasy, but because it was real. And the question gnaws at you. Who was that? Was that a dream or a memory I wasn't supposed to keep? There are theories. Some say these dreams are bleed-throughs from past lives, fragments of identity rising when the conscious mind loosens its grip. Others suggest they're echoes of parallel selves, versions of you existing in other realities, visited briefly in states of altered awareness. But perhaps, most unnervingly, they're not others at all. They're still you. The soul may not be a singular point. It may be a spectrum. And in dreams, where boundaries dissolve, you can slide along that spectrum, inhabiting different iterations of your own being, not in sequence, not by choice, but by resonance. You dream who you need to remember. This effect doesn't stop at sleep. Sometimes it follows you. You wake up and catch yourself responding in a way that isn't like you. A thought pattern, a gesture, a fear that feels out of place. And you wonder, did I bring something back? Did I bring someone back? The danger, of course, is disorientation. The self feels less solid, the world less fixed. You begin to question which you is the original. The answer? None of them. Or maybe all. Identity, like time, is more layered than we admit. What dreams reveal is not your fragmentation, but your multiplicity. And sometimes the mix-up is not accidental. It's instructional. The dream asks, what would it be like to live with less fear? To speak differently? To choose what your current self avoids? The new identity becomes a rehearsal, a provocation, a mirror. But the lesson only lands if you remember. So pay attention to the details. What did your dream self value? What did they fear? Who loved them? Who did they lose? These aren't trivia. They are keys to who you are now and who you might become. So when you wake from one of those dreams, where you weren't you, but you were, don't rush to shake it off. Sit with it. Ask, what did this version of me want to show me? Because sometimes the soul teaches not by repeating, but by transforming. And when you forget who you are, you might just remember who else you've been. The Earth Lock Spiral. You've lived many lives. At least that's what the dreams suggest. Different names, different places, different endings. And yet, they all seem to happen on Earth. You've never dreamed of floating in alien skies or living on distant stars. Every life you return to is rooted in this soil, bound to this gravity, steeped in this same planetary breath. This is the Earthlock spiral, the recurring soul pattern where reincarnation loops again and again within Earth's boundaries, as if you're tethered to this planet by something deeper than choice. At first, it feels like coincidence. another lifetime set in a different era. You dream of ancient roads beneath your feet, of modern cities rising around you, of futures that feel like echoes rather than visions. Time changes, but the location doesn't. And over time, the pattern emerges. You always return here. Why? Some traditions say Earth is a school, a dense, difficult one, a place where souls incarnate, not for ease, but for evolution. The emotional weight here is heavier, the lessons slower, time thicker. On Earth, the soul cannot rush. It must feel. And so it returns, again and again, not in punishment, but in devotion, to learn, to complete. But sometimes the repetition becomes suffocating. The spiral starts to feel like a trap. You sense you've been here for lifetimes, cycling through war and wonder, love and loss, light and collapse. And you begin to wonder, why can't I leave? Why am I still here? The earthlock spiral tightens when we forget. When we identify only with the roles we play here, the grief we carry, the stories we inherit, the soul's broader memory fades. You forget you chose this. You forget this was never meant to be permanent. The spiral begins to feel like gravity, when in truth, it was always magnetism. Dreams are where the spiral becomes visible. You walk through a dream and realize, I've died here before, or I've buried someone under this tree, or this street once held a revolution I never lived to see. These aren't hallucinations. They're soul echoes, layers of your own presence, stacked in the same location across time. And the earth itself remembers. There are places you go that activate something ancient in you, a mountain that feels like a mother, a river that speaks in tones your heart understands. These are not poetic ideas. They are recognition points, places where your soul left traces of itself, and now returns to pick them up again. But here's the truth. Earth is not your prison. It is your mirror. Every return is a reflection. Every life a variation. And the spiral, while repetitive, is not without movement, like a seed returning to soil, not to remain buried, but to grow through it. The earthlock spiral begins to loosen when you start to see the pattern, not with frustration, but with clarity. You begin to respond differently. You make the choice your former selves avoided. You forgive where they clung. You listen where they shouted. And slowly, the spiral opens. Not upward, but inward. You're not here to escape Earth. You're here to outgrow the version of yourself that needed it this way. And one day, maybe in dream, maybe in death, maybe in a lifetime not yet born, you'll reach the still point at the center of the spiral, the moment when Earth no longer holds you because you've fully held yourself. So if you feel stuck here, if you wake from dreams soaked in the same soil, the same sky, don't resent it. Ask it. What am I still learning through this body, this place, this weight? Because when you walk the spiral with open eyes, you don't just return to Earth. Earth returns you to yourself. The soul lottery. Dilemma. You dream of being chosen or not chosen. A number is called. A hand is raised. A gate opens for someone else. You feel the familiar ache of waiting to belong, but the rules aren't clear. You don't know what you did wrong or right. All you know is that something decided where you ended up, and it wasn't entirely your doing. You wake with a quiet, strange question pulsing behind your ribs. What if this life was assigned? Like a ticket pulled from a jar. This is the soul lottery dilemma, the unsettling idea that the body, the family, the era you're born into might not be the result of deep karmic architecture or divine design, but something more ambiguous, a process both meaningful and random. We're taught that our lives are tailored to us, that our soul, before birth, chooses its next incarnation with precision and purpose. But what if some souls don't choose? What if some are placed, assigned into lives by a mechanism too vast, too complex, or too indifferent for our minds to grasp? In Dream, this possibility surfaces. You're standing in a long hallway, rows of doors, each one glowing slightly differently. But you don't pick. You're led, nudged, redirected. Maybe you rebel. Maybe you step through a door not meant for you. And the dream punishes you, or transforms you, or simply moves on. And when you wake, the feeling lingers. Did I get the right life, or just the next available one? The soul lottery dilemma isn't about victimhood. It's about uncertainty. It challenges the comforting belief that everything has a perfect place. It asks, what if you were placed here, not because it was ideal, but because it was available? You were born into a body you didn't ask for, a culture that misunderstood you, a system that feels foreign no matter how well you speak the language. And somewhere in your sleep, your soul replays that lottery draw, that flicker of placement, not punishment, not reward, just assignment. Some say this is what makes Earth so unique, a realm not of pristine design, but of dense complexity. Souls arrive here through a mixture of choice and chance, a web of karmic pull, ancestral magnetism, cosmic timing, and yes, sometimes randomness. But here's the twist. Even if you didn't choose this life, you can still choose how to meet it. The dream may show you being passed over, forgotten, given a life that feels less than. But what if that's not a sentence? What if it's a challenge coded into the randomness itself? The opportunity to generate meaning where none was handed to you. There are souls who win the lottery, wealth, beauty, ease, and others who land in pain, in silence, in generational trauma. But the dream doesn't care who won. It shows you what you do after the drawing, what you build, what you remember. Some dreams even let you glimpse the other ticket, the other life. You see what you could have been. The artist in Florence, the child of healers, the warrior born too late. And you wake with grief, with longing, with confusion. Why not that? Why this? But grief is also gateway, longing, a compass, and confusion, a kind of clarity, because the soul doesn't need the right life. It needs engagement. It needs presence. It needs you to take whatever life you landed in, by design or chance, and walk it with honesty, with curiosity, with refusal to numb out. So maybe it was a lottery. Maybe you drew a number with no explanation. But here you are, awake, breathing, dreaming. Ask not why you're here. Ask, now that I am, what will I do with it? Because in the end, it may not be the drawing that defines the soul, but how it dares to live the life it never saw coming. The worthiness feedback loop. You find yourself in a dream where you're being judged, but there's no courtroom, no judge, no jury, only a presence, a sensation. You're standing before something larger than language, and it's not asking what you've done. It's asking what you believe you deserve. You feel it deep in your chest. Every moment you've doubted your worth, every time you settled, every instance you quietly said, "This is all I'm allowed," and the dream responds accordingly. You don't rise or fall based on merit, but on self-perception. This is the worthiness feedback loop, a haunting paradox where your reincarnation path seems to reflect not your actions, but your beliefs about yourself. In theory, we think karma is objective. We earn, we receive, we learn, we evolve. But what if it's not that simple? What if the soul is shaped as much by how it feels about itself as by what it has actually done? In this loop, the soul replays cycles not because of external judgment, but because it hasn't yet forgiven itself. You may dream of being handed a chance, freedom, love, a key to some door, but you hesitate. You hear yourself say, "I'm not ready, I'm not worthy," and the opportunity dissolves, not because the dream denied you, but because you denied yourself. Again and again. You wake up, heavy, not afraid of punishment, but exhausted by repetition. It's not just a dream phenomenon. In waking life, the loop continues. You reach the edge of change, of receiving more, then sabotage it. Or you attract love and then push it away. Or you choose work, relationships, even spiritual paths that reflect a version of you you've already outgrown, because that's what still feels true. The loop feeds itself. The less worthy you feel, the more you settle. The more you settle, the more your reality confirms that you were right to doubt. And so, the soul reincarnates into lives that match its own internal estimation of value. The punishment isn't external, it's internalized. You carry the blueprint from one life to the next. In the dream, you may see yourself climbing a ladder that leads nowhere, running toward a figure who always turns away, speaking your truth only for the sound to vanish. These aren't random. They're reflections of belief. And the belief is simple, buried, and devastating. I am not enough. But here's where the paradox softens. The dream is not mocking you. It's showing you the loop, the pattern. It's giving you a mirror so clean it hurts to look into. And in that mirror, you may realize, this is not about punishment. This is about programming. Some dreams even offer a glimpse of what's possible beyond the loop. You speak your needs, and the landscape responds. You accept the love offered, and the scene brightens. Not because you earned it, but because you allowed it. Because, in that moment, the soul dared to believe, maybe I am worthy of more. This is not affirmation. It's not positive thinking. It's a deeper reorientation of the soul's architecture, a rewriting of the feedback loop. You may still wake up unsure, still carrying echoes of shame, of not enoughness. But now you see it. You name it. And naming is the beginning of release. Because once you realize the loop is not law, but belief, you can choose to stop repeating it. You can begin in small moments to imagine another truth. I don't have to suffer to grow. I don't have to prove to be loved. I don't have to earn what was always meant to be mine. And then the dream shifts. The landscape opens. The loop begins to unravel. Not because you've done more, but because you finally remembered who you are, beneath all the beliefs that kept you circling. The recognition twitch. It happens quickly. So quickly, most people ignore it. A twitch in the chest. A flicker behind the eyes. A sudden, unnameable jolt when you meet someone for the first time and feel like it's the 100th. It's not romantic, not dramatic, just a quiet surge, like the soul flinching before memory returns. This is the recognition twitch, the subtle, involuntary moment when two souls cross paths after lifetimes apart, and their bodies react before their minds catch up. It doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it's warmth, a soft pull towards someone whose presence feels like home. Other times, it's discomfort, an edge of anxiety that can't be traced. You feel exposed, seen. Even if the conversation is brief, something deep beneath the surface moves. And in dreams, the feeling amplifies. You find yourself dreaming of a stranger, someone you've never met in waking life, but who feels central. You laugh together, or fight, or simply sit in a silence that feels carved from other centuries. You wake up shaken, not because of what happened, but because of how it felt. Familiar in a way nothing else is. That's the recognition. Twitch playing out across lifetimes. The science-minded might call it pattern recognition, a neural glitch, a false positive triggered by a passing resemblance. But the soul knows better, because it's not just a face. It's a frequency, a tone, an energetic signature. You may not remember their name from before, but your body remembers the impact they left. Sometimes, this twitch marks the return of an old teacher, or a wound, or a promise. And in that first blink of contact, your dream shows you more than waking life ever could. A handshake that lingers, a voice in a dream calling out a name you don't use anymore, a hand resting on your shoulder in a way that makes your entire body still. Some people report meeting someone new and then dreaming of shared pasts that feel vivid, specific details, shared history, places that don't exist anymore but seem real in the dream. You were comrades, lovers, rivals, or simply co-travelers, and the dream doesn't try to explain it. It just shows you, not with logic, but with memory that lives beneath memory. And sometimes the twitch is a warning. The recognition carries weight. You feel danger, tension, a kind of sorrow that comes from stories unfinished. You don't know why you feel defensive around someone gentle, or why you keep returning despite the quiet dread. The dream replays it, over and over, not to punish you, but to give you a chance to finish what was started lifetimes ago. Recognition doesn't mean reunion. It doesn't mean it's meant to last. It just means that some stories don't end. They pause. And when you feel the twitch, when your soul stirs before your mind can understand, it's the signal that one of those stories has resumed. You might not need to do anything. Not every recognition asks for action. Some just want acknowledgement, a silent honoring, a pause that says, I see you, I remember, and that's enough. Because in a world that insists every moment is new, the twitch reminds you, some things aren't. So next time you meet someone and feel that pulse of knowing, that breathless flicker of something lost and found, don't dismiss it. It might not be the beginning. It might just be the continuation of something older than your name, the déjà vu accumulation. It starts with a pause, a flicker. You walk into a room you've never seen and feel your breath catch. A sentence is spoken, and your body tenses as if it's already heard it. A smell, a movement, the way the light lands across someone's cheek. It all collapses into a quiet certainty. I've been here before. And then it happens again and again. Moments scattered across years, layered like soft fingerprints left behind by lives you don't remember. This is the déjà vu accumulation. The slow, quiet stacking of fragments across your life that suggest you're not moving through time as a stranger, but as someone who's already walked some of these paths. Not once, but many times. Déjà vu is usually dismissed, a blip in the brain, a misfire in memory, an illusion of repetition. But what if it isn't? What if each flicker is not a mistake, but a reminder? What if these moments aren't random, but residual? The echo of something once lived, peeking through the cracks of forgetting. In dreams, these echoes are stronger. You dream of places that don't exist, but feel like home. You walk hallways that change shape, but always feel known. You interact with people whose names you never ask for, because something in you already knows. You wake with that same weight in your chest. Not confusion, but familiarity. The moment has happened, or will, or is happening still. The accumulation builds slowly. A single déjà vu moment might be easy to overlook, but over time, a pattern emerges. You notice they cluster around certain places, certain people, certain choices, as if something, some thread, is looping through your life, nudging you toward recognition. It's not always comfortable. Déjà vu can be disorienting, even haunting, especially when it attaches to pain. You see a tragedy unfold and feel a cold certainty. This has already happened. You hold someone's hand and grieve them while they're still alive. You speak a truth you feel like you've spoken 100 times before, but no one remembers but you. Some say this accumulation points to bleed through from past lives, that the soul, unable to forget completely, leaves breadcrumbs. Others suggest these are markers of non-linear time, that moments ripple across dimensions, and sometimes your consciousness catches up with itself. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe déjà vu is how the soul remembers itself, not through grand visions, but through tiny ruptures. Not through clarity, but through familiarity that defies logic. And as they build, something shifts. You stop seeing your life as a one-way street. You start to feel the loops, the layers, the repetitions that aren't just habits, but echoes. And when you begin to listen to those echoes, they respond. The dream becomes clearer. The moments slow down. And in one of those déjà vu flashes, you don't just feel recognition, you feel choice. The chance to respond differently this time. To step outside the echo, just far enough to shift its rhythm. Because maybe you've said these words before. Maybe you've made this mistake. Maybe you've walked this road. But this time, you remember. And memory, in the hands of the awake soul, is the beginning of freedom. The death dream theory. You dream of dying, but the dream doesn't end. You feel the impact. The breath stops. The world darkens. And yet, you remain. A presence without body. A quiet awareness hovering above the scene or floating into something else entirely. There is no panic, only continuity. You wake up gasping, not because the dream was terrifying, but because something in it felt too true. This is the death dream theory, the idea that some dreams don't just simulate death, but recreate the moment of it, and possibly even extend from what lingers after. You've had those dreams, the fall that never ends, the last heartbeat, the moment of letting go. And sometimes, What comes after is more vivid than anything else in sleep. A tunnel, a light, a garden, a vast nothingness, or even another life beginning. The theory is simple, but unsettling. What if the dreams we think are just metaphors, are actually replays? Not symbols, but memories. The final moments of a life lived long ago, encoded into our soul's archive, bleeding through into the dream space when something in our current life stirs the echo. You may dream of a battlefield and feel your chest tighten, your limbs go cold, as though your last breath already happened. Or you may drown in silence, not in terror, but in release. The dream doesn't wake you in the moment of death. It carries you through it. And what happens next is the part we're never taught to expect. You're still there. Many who've experienced near-death experiences describe this same sensation. A pulling back from the body, a detachment, a state of expanded awareness. And in dreams, it happens too, without trauma, without crisis. Just a deep, enveloping shift from embodiment into something else. And that's where the death dream theory sharpens. What if some of your dreams aren't just imagined death scenes? What if they are death scenes from other lives? What if the dream isn't replaying fear, but reminding you how often you've done this before? You begin to notice patterns. The way the dream always ends with silence. The moment you float above your body. The face of a stranger who holds your hand as you fade. You feel the grief of leaving, or the peace, or the regret. And you carry that emotional imprint into the next life, into this one. Sometimes the dream starts after death. You're moving through a landscape not shaped like Earth, not heaven, not hell, but a middle space, a processing room, a waiting station. And you see others, quiet, transparent, waiting too. You ask a question, but no one speaks. Yet somehow you understand. You are between. You wake from these dreams different, not frightened, but aware, not just of death, but of the thread that runs through it. You don't fear the end in quite the same way, because you've already felt it. And it didn't feel like the end. The theory doesn't try to answer what lies beyond. It doesn't claim dreams are perfect replicas. Only that the soul remembers more than we realize. And when we sleep, when the mind loosens its grip, those final moments surface, not to scare us, but to reacquaint us with impermanence. So if you've ever dreamed of dying and found yourself still dreaming afterward, don't brush it off. You may have touched a thread from your own deeper archive. You may have walked the seam between ending and beginning. And you may have remembered, if only briefly, that death is not the curtain call. It's the scene change, the nested lives illusion. You wake from a dream and sigh with relief, only to realize you're still dreaming. The world looks real, feels real, but something is off. You try to speak, but your voice sounds distant. You open a door, and the hallway leads somewhere unfamiliar. Again, you wake, this time in your bed. but the alarm clock blinks the wrong time. The sky outside is the wrong color. And suddenly, a question rises in your chest like static. How many layers deep am I? This is the nested lives illusion, the eerie phenomenon where dreams contain lives within lives, each one feeling complete, each one convincing you this is the real one, until another curtain lifts. It isn't just false awakening. It's false identity. A sequence of selves stacked like Russian dolls, each one wrapped around a deeper version of you. You may dream that you're a different person. You have a job, a family, a story. And then you die in the dream, or fall asleep, and wake up in another life, a different one, sometimes entirely unrelated. But the transition doesn't feel abrupt. It feels intentional, like you've dropped into another layer, peeling back one identity only to wear another. Some people experience an entire lifetime in a single dream. They grow old, love, lose, learn, and just before death, they awaken, only to discover that was one layer of many. And the emotional residue lingers. You miss people who never existed. You carry grief from a life that never happened. But the ache is real. The nested lives illusion challenges our deepest assumption, that we are only ever one person at a time. But what if the soul is more complex? What if dreams reveal not just who we've been, but how many versions of us can exist simultaneously? What if some of these dream lives aren't past lives or fantasies, but coexisting selves, running in tandem, each unaware of the others except in sleep? The illusion, then, is not that you're dreaming, but that you think waking is the top layer. What if it isn't? What if your current life is just another room in the mansion of the soul? And each dream is a doorway, not into fiction, but into another chamber of being, just as vivid, just as real, but inaccessible to your daytime mind. Nested dreams sometimes appear recursive. You wake, only to watch yourself fall asleep again. You meet a version of yourself who remembers things you've never lived. You pass someone on the street and feel an instant, overwhelming familiarity, not from this life, but from one of the layers beneath. These experiences unsettle us, not because they're bizarre, but because they threaten the illusion of singular identity. They suggest that the self we defend and define so carefully is just one of many. A mask worn briefly. A page in a much thicker book. The dream doesn't explain. It doesn't hand you a map. It simply lets you feel it, layer by layer, letting each one fall away until you reach a core, not of clarity, but of silence. A space where no story holds, because all stories have already been lived. And when you wake, really wake, you feel it. The weight of all those lives pressing softly behind your eyes. The question you can't shake. Which layer am I in now? And deeper still, does it matter? Because maybe the point isn't to find the real life. Maybe it's to realize that reality itself is a spiral, and the soul, vast and quiet, is dreaming through all of it, again and again. The cosmic bureaucracy. Paradox. You dream of standing in a hallway that stretches infinitely in both directions. Doors line the walls. Behind each, a figure waits, some in robes, some in suits, some with clipboards, glowing scrolls, or screens that flicker with symbols you don't recognize. You're there for a reason, but no one will tell you what it is. They ask questions you don't understand. They speak in a language that feels like code. Forms appear. Rules change. You're caught in a waiting room that belongs to no place and every place. Welcome to the cosmic bureaucracy paradox, the unsettling dream world in which reincarnation feels not like a sacred dance, but like an administrative maze. You might laugh when you wake up. That was absurd, you think. But underneath the absurdity is something colder, sharper, a strange discomfort. Because even in the dream, you felt it. The sense that your next life wasn't chosen by you, but processed. Like a vaso in a cabinet. Like an application pending review. In some of these dreams, you're applying for your next incarnation. You submit a request. You ask for clarity, for peace, for purpose. The response? Your karma is incomplete. Or you've already been assigned. You ask to see a supervisor, and they vanish. You're told to sit, to wait, to forget. And then, you're born again. The cosmic bureaucracy paradox suggests a version of reincarnation where the system is real, but impersonal. Where lives are sorted, approved, not with wisdom or compassion, but with the cold indifference of cosmic order. Not cruelty, just process. Some dreamers describe offices made of light. Others walk through temples filled with celestial archivists. Everything glows, but nothing listens. You're not punished. You're just handled. This paradox hits hardest when you start asking, did I choose this life? Or was I processed into it? Was this really my soul's desire? Or just the next available opening in some unseen system? And worse, does the system care if I'm ready? Some say these dreams reflect the soul's struggle with meaninglessness, that they're projections of our fear that life is arbitrary. But maybe they reveal something deeper, that even in the most sacred systems, scale can create detachment, that even divine order can feel like red tape. And yet, sometimes in these dreams, you meet someone different, a guide who pauses, who looks at you, not as a number, but as a presence. And with a glance, they say nothing. But everything changes. The form disappears. The walls dissolve. And for a moment, you remember. You are more than the system that processed you. This is the true paradox. That even within the most rigid cosmic machinery, grace can still intervene. That the soul, though routed and recycled, is never truly lost in the process. That behind the glint of bureaucracy, something still breathes, still watches, still waits for you to wake up. Because perhaps the system was never meant to control. Perhaps it was meant to reveal how deeply you still cling to hierarchy, to fairness, to explanation. And in letting go of that, you might step off the conveyor belt and back into conscious choice. So if you wake from dreams of celestial departments, glowing terminals, and whispered numbers, don't dismiss them as cosmic satire. Ask, where am I still waiting for permission to live the life I already have? Because the system might not care, but you do. And that's where the soul's real power begins. The free will mirage. You dream of making choices, turning left instead of right, speaking instead of staying silent, walking away from someone who once held your entire world. In the dream, you feel powerful, intentional. You decide, you move, you act. But then something shifts. The scene resets. The same moment plays again. This time, you make a different choice. But the result is the same, or worse. And a question forms like a crack in glass. Was any of that really my choice? This is the free will mirage, the unsettling sensation that what feels like agency might, at some deeper level, be illusion. That the choices you believe define your path may already be part of a design so vast, so recursive, that even your rebellion has been written in. In dreams, this comes forward like a trick. You try to change the outcome. You go back through the door, speak the line differently, embrace the person you once rejected. And yet, the end repeats. The love still leaves. The building still burns. You wake with an ache in your bones, not from loss, but from the sense that you were never steering the wheel. It's not just in dreams. You feel it in waking life, too. The sense that you were always going to end up in this job, meet that person, carry this wound, that even your most spontaneous, bold, or rebellious acts feel inevitable, as if they didn't arise from choice, but from programming. Some philosophies embrace this, determinism dressed in spiritual cloth. They say your soul, before incarnation, chooses every major arc, the people you'll meet, the challenges you'll face, even the endings. Free will, they suggest, is local, confined to how you respond, not what you receive. But the free will mirage cuts deeper. It doesn't just question whether you chose your life. It questions whether you're choosing anything at all. You may dream of observing yourself, watching a version of you make a decision that feels out of character, yet completely logical. You scream at them to stop, to turn. But they don't. Because that's not your role. You're not the driver. You're the witness. And something about that feels horrifying and oddly peaceful. The mirage isn't here to take away your power. It's here to strip the illusion around it. Because maybe your choices aren't as free as you believe, not because you're being manipulated, but because you're still living from unconscious loops, inherited wounds, invisible fears, repetitive karma, traumas that whisper, don't trust, don't rest, don't rise. And so you obey, thinking you are choosing. The dream reveals the cage, not by locking you in, but by showing you the moment you almost escaped, almost chose differently, almost saw the pattern, but turned back just as you always have. And that is where the mirage begins to dissolve. Not in fantasy, not in control, but in awareness. Because even if the script is written, you can become the reader. Even if the soul pre-selected the stage, you can still improvise the tone. And sometimes that tiny shift of how you choose, not what you choose, is enough to change the entire rhythm of a life. So the next time you dream of decisions that feel like déjà vu, ask not whether you had free will. Ask, was I awake enough to use it differently? Because freedom isn't in the choices you make. It's in the consciousness you bring to them. The memory leak phenomenon. You're brushing your teeth, tying your shoes, walking down a hallway you've walked 100 times, and then it hits you. A flash, a feeling, a scene that doesn't belong to this moment, or even this life. A man's voice calling out. A distant city skyline, the smell of firewood and sea salt. You freeze, not because it makes sense, but because it doesn't. It arrives uninvited, uncontextualized, and yet absolutely real. You've just experienced the memory leak phenomenon, the strange and sudden surfacing of memories from other lifetimes, slipping into your present like water through an unseen crack. These aren't imagined scenes. They don't unfold like dreams. They interrupt, briefly, sharply, sometimes with images, sometimes with emotion. You might feel crushing grief for a child you never had, a spike of joy in the middle of a traffic light. You might remember a goodbye you've never said, or wake with a name on your lips that no one around you knows. The memory leak doesn't ask permission. It bleeds through when you're least guarded, when the conscious mind is quiet, when routine softens your grip on reality. That's when it slips in, not to confuse, but to remind. Because somewhere, beneath the logic and the calendars and the skin, your soul is carrying more than one lifetime of story. In dreams, it happens more vividly. You see yourself in clothing you've never worn, speaking a language you don't know. You know the layout of a house you've never seen. You mourn someone before they even die. And when you wake, the memory stays, not like a dream, but like a bruise on the edge of awareness. Some believe these leaks come from unfinished business, lives that didn't close cleanly, decisions that fractured something in the soul's timeline. The memory doesn't return as punishment. It returns as a request. Will you finally hold this now? But not all leaks are heavy. Some are filled with beauty. You might hear music that feels anciently yours, smell a scent that pulls tears from your eyes with no explanation. These aren't random triggers. They're fragments, shards of lives still echoing through the walls of this one. And sometimes, it's not your past life at all. It's a parallel one, a version of you running alongside this timeline, just far enough apart to remain unseen, until something overlaps. A moment, a thought, a dream. And suddenly, you feel like someone else is remembering through you. That's the paradox of the memory leak phenomenon. It doesn't always tell you whose memory you're receiving, only that it matters, that it wants presence, not analysis, just acknowledgement. You don't need to understand every detail. You don't need to decode the scene. The value isn't in the memory itself. It's in your willingness to hold it without resistance. To say, yes, this too is part of my long becoming. And perhaps, with time, these fragments begin to weave. What once felt random begins to form a shape, a story, a soul history, not bound to one lifetime, but carried like a thread of gold through all of them. So the next time something rises unbidden, a name, a place, a grief, pause. Don't call it imagination, call it a return, because memory doesn't always belong to the brain. Sometimes it belongs to the soul overcrowding effect. You wake from a dream, and for a few moments, you're not sure who you are. You remember multiple names. You feel the echoes of different lives, Not just one dream narrative, but layers, shifting identities, fragments of other selves speaking all at once. You sit up in the dark and whisper, "Too many." This is the soul overcrowding effect, the disorienting phenomenon where multiple past lives, unresolved versions of you, and perhaps even energies, not entirely yours, seem to inhabit the same psychic space at once. It doesn't feel like possession. It's not dramatic. It's subtle, heavy, like your soul is a house with too many rooms open, and all the doors are creaking at once. You feel sadness and can't trace its source. You act out of character and wonder if that character ever belonged to you in the first place. Some dreams don't tell stories. They feel like gatherings. You're hosting a crowd of selves. One is grieving. Another is angry. One watches from a corner without speaking. You look down, and your hands keep changing. Child, elder, stranger. In the dream, you move through them all, not as one person, but as many, simultaneous, fractured, alive. The waking mind tries to flatten it, just a weird dream, but something stays. You feel full, not satisfied, but crowded. You carry moods that don't fit your life, memories that don't belong to any single narrative, and an exhaustion that no sleep can cure. The soul overcrowding effect raises uncomfortable questions. How many unfinished versions of you are still active? How many choices, avoided, abandoned, half-answered, are still echoing across your energetic field? What if reincarnation isn't a clean sequence, but a messy convergence? The linear soul story is comforting. One life after another, neatly stacked. But dreams suggest otherwise. They imply overlap, compression, like souls in different timelines pressing against each other, blurring identity. What if reincarnation is more like overlapping transparency sheets, with only your current body anchoring a focus point? In this crowd of selves, some are loud, some whisper, some don't even know you're there. And the longer they remain unacknowledged, the more you feel pulled in conflicting directions. You want one thing and act on another. You commit, then withdraw. You speak truths that feel old, as if inherited from a version of you who's still waiting for resolution. This isn't pathology. It's inheritance. The soul doesn't forget. It collects. And when the vessel gets too full, the weight shows up in dreams, not as metaphor, but as signal, a call to reconcile, to release, or at least to listen. Some traditions speak of soul fragmentation. Others describe karmic clutter. Either way, the solution isn't erasure. It's integration. You begin by noticing. Which voices keep speaking through me? Which wounds don't match my story, but still shape my choices? And in dreams, you can meet them, not to push them away, but to ask, what do you need? Sometimes, one version of you just needs to be seen, to be heard saying, I tried, or I failed, or I loved and lost, and never got to speak of it. With time, the crowd quiets, not because they're gone, but because they've been welcomed back into wholeness. So, if you wake up feeling like more than one person, like a chorus rather than a solo, don't panic. You're not broken. You're converging. And when the soul gets too loud, It isn't asking to be emptied. It's asking to be witnessed. The light tunnel. Split. You dream of dying. But this time, you don't wake up in your bed gasping for air. Instead, you see the light, the tunnel, that familiar near-death iconography whispered across cultures and generations. You're moving through it, not fast, not slow, just steady. There's peace, clarity, a silence that feels like home. But then something fractures. The light splits. Two paths, two tunnels, diverging like choices you were never told you'd have. And deep within, a question arises. Which direction leads to life? Which one to something else? This is the light tunnel split, a rare and haunting dream encounter where even death seems to offer not one, but multiple exit routes. We're taught the tunnel leads to the afterlife, to the next realm, to peace. But what if at the moment of death or reincarnation, the soul isn't offered a single path, but a choice? What if that choice is never made consciously, but is still felt? And what if, in our dreams, we revisit that fork again and again, replaying a moment we don't remember choosing? In this dream, the light is not just guidance. It's division. One path pulls you with love, familiarity, the sense of reunion. The other? It vibrates with something else, curiosity, a quiet call to return. Not forward, but backward, back into life, into density, into pain, joy, and the unfinished business of being human again. Some dreamers report being torn, longing for the peace of the light, yet unable to resist the pull of the unfinished. Others are pushed, nudged, gently or forcefully redirected. Not yet. You still have more to learn. You're not done. And the dream ends there, abrupt, ambiguous. What if the tunnel is not just a passage, but a test of readiness? What if your next incarnation isn't dictated by karma, but by the subtle alignment of your soul at the moment you stand between those two lights? In the dream, you may find yourself split, not metaphorically, but literally. Two versions of you choosing different tunnels. One reincarnates, one moves on, and both exist simultaneously. Parallel paths that you only glimpse in the flicker of sleep. And when you wake, you feel it. A residue, a tension in the chest, a strange weight. Not fear, but the echo of a choice you don't remember making. It shows up in waking life, too. Moments where you feel like you're living a life that wasn't the one you originally meant to take. A timeline that feels slightly off, as though your soul slipped through the wrong tunnel. Or maybe the right one for a different lesson. The light tunnel. Split challenges our most sacred assumptions about death. It says, maybe there is no final destination, only branching corridors. Some lead to rebirth, some lead to release, some loop. And if time is non-linear, as many mystics suggest, then these tunnels may not just mark beginnings or ends. They may be portals to alternate lives already unfolding. Which means your dreams of choosing, of splitting, of hesitating at the mouth of light may not be memories. They may be live transmissions. So the next time you dream of light, not warm and singular, but fractured and many, pay attention. You may be witnessing the moment your soul last made a choice, or the moment it is making one now. Because death may not be the end. It may be the crossroad. And the tunnel, despite what we've been told, doesn't lead in just one direction. The rebirth identity. Trap. You're born again. You don't remember choosing it, but you're here, breathing, growing, becoming someone new. And yet, somewhere beneath the surface of this fresh identity, there's a tension, a subtle resistance, like your soul hasn't quite settled into the shape it's been assigned. You look in the mirror and wonder, who am I now? And how much of that is really me? This is the rebirth identity. The strange inner conflict that arises when the soul reincarnates into a life that doesn't align with who it once was, yet is forced to adapt, to conform, to become someone else entirely. In the early years, the tension is invisible. You learn the rules. You absorb the language, the culture, the gender, the roles, and with each layer added, the soul beneath goes quieter, not erased, but overwritten. And by the time you can speak, you've already begun forgetting. But then the dreams begin. You dream of being someone else. A farmer, a mother, a warrior, a monk. You speak with ease in a language you've never learned. You ache for landscapes you've never seen. You feel pulled toward choices your current life has no place for. And when you wake, you feel miscast, like an actor who showed up for the wrong role. That's the trap. Because the new life demands full presence, full immersion. But the soul still echoes, still hums with the memory of a previous existence. And it creates friction. You may not remember the past life in full, but you remember being different. And now, you're someone else, expected to play a part that never quite fits. This inner dissonance shows up in countless ways. Identity confusion, discomfort in your own name, a quiet rejection of cultural expectations, feeling older than your age, feeling foreign in your own body. These aren't neuroses, they're leaks. The soul bleeding through the new identity, saying, this isn't the whole of me. And yet, you can't go back. So the soul does what it must. It adapts, bends, performs, learns to survive in a costume that feels tight around the heart. And that performance becomes so seamless, even you forget it's a mask. Until something breaks. A crisis, a heartbreak, a dream too vivid to dismiss. And suddenly, the persona cracks. The identity falters. You see yourself clearly for a moment, not as the person you've built, but as the presence that has persisted across lives. And you realize, you are not this body, not entirely. You are something older, wider. But here's the paradox. The trap is not in being reborn. It's in believing the identity is all you are. The moment you cling to the label, the role, the narrative as absolute truth, the soul begins to shrink. Not in power, but in access. Some never escape the trap. They die confused, misaligned, having lived a life that was well-behaved, but deeply unlived. Others awaken, not by erasing the new identity, but by expanding beyond it. They begin to say, this is who I am now, but not all I have ever been. And something unlocks. You may never remember the full story of your previous life. You don't have to. What matters is the whisper beneath the roles you play, the sense that you were someone else, and that someone still walks with you. So when you feel out of place, not because of anxiety, but because of a deeper dissonance, pause. Ask yourself, am I living a story that truly fits the shape of my soul? And if the answer is no, don't panic. That realization is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. Because escaping the rebirth identity trap doesn't require remembering your past life. It only requires remembering that this one isn't the only truth you carry. The purpose, contamination, loop. You come into this life with a pull, soft at first, but undeniable. A draw towards something, healing, creating, building, teaching, wandering. It isn't a profession or a goal. It's a tone, a sense of orientation. You don't know why, but you feel it in your bones. I was meant to do something. And then, as the years unfold, the clarity begins to blur. You compromise, you adapt, you grow up. And one day, you wake up, disconnected. The pull is still there, but layered under expectation, survival, identity. This is the purpose contamination loop, the slow erosion of soul direction, not by forgetting, but by misinterpreting the purpose you came here with. In dreams, you see the original thread. You're doing something simple, planting seeds, guiding lost travelers, painting walls in colors that change emotion. The dream doesn't hand you a career path. It returns you to an essence. But when you wake, the mind tries to package it, tries to fit the sacred into a resume. And the loop begins. You mistake clarity for outcome. You mistake meaning for recognition. And worst of all, you mistake your soul's calling for something you must prove to others. This is how purpose becomes contaminated. It's not stolen in a single moment. It's rewritten slowly. You're told what success looks like, what matters, what doesn't. You adjust. You compromise. And eventually, your original purpose is still there, but it's wearing someone else's face. You become a healer, but only through systems that ignore the soul. You become a teacher, but only to survive. You become an artist, but your hands stop moving unless someone else is watching. The soul still tries to speak, but its language has been co-opted, marketed, diluted. And then come the dreams. You return to the garden, the quiet road, the version of you who creates with no audience, who speaks truth with no strategy, who simply lives the purpose without branding it. And when you wake, something aches, not because your life is meaningless, but because the meaning has been distorted. This loop doesn't just confuse you, it wears you down. Because when the soul senses it's not aligned with what it came to do, it begins to drain. No matter how much success or validation you gather, it doesn't land. You feel restless, or numb, or tired in a way no sleep can fix. And the paradox is, it's not because you failed to find your purpose. It's because you found it, and then slowly let it be reshaped into something else. But here's the hidden mercy. The soul doesn't forget. It keeps dreaming, keeps pulling, keeps sending signs, not grand or dramatic, but quiet course corrections. A sentence you read that brings tears. A memory from childhood that suddenly stings. A random, vivid dream of a life you might have lived if you hadn't turned away. And in those moments, you get a glimpse. The purpose is still there, beneath the layers, beneath the performance. You don't need to throw your life away to recover it. You only need to stop negotiating with it. Let it return as it was, raw, quiet, unpolished. Let it be inconvenient. Let it cost you something. That's when it becomes true again. So if you feel lost, if you feel like the fire has gone out, not because you don't know who you are, but because you do and haven't been living it, ask yourself, what if the thing I came here to do is still waiting for me, exactly where I dropped it? And what if all it takes is picking it back up, not to sell, not to explain, but simply to live? The forgotten voice. Glitch. You're in a dream, speaking. Words so shy leave your mouth, but they don't sound like your voice. They're too low, too high, too calm, too strange. Or maybe they sound right, but wrong inside, like you're mimicking yourself. You keep talking, but something's missing. A sensation, a frequency. You wake up, and for a moment, you hesitate to speak, as if your own voice might not return as you left it. This is the forgotten voice. Glitch. A subtle, haunting phenomenon where your dream self reveals just how far you've drifted from your soul's native tone. You may not notice it at first. The voice in the dream changes just slightly. A different accent, a slower rhythm, a tendency to say what your waking self never dares to. And it's not just sound. It's intention. In the dream, your words carry a different weight. They land. They mean. You speak truth without hesitation. You ask for what you need. You say no without guilt. And then you wake and realize, I used to speak like that. The forgotten voice. Glitch doesn't only happen in sleep. It shows up when you hear a recording of yourself and don't recognize the person speaking. Or when someone repeats something you said, and it sounds hollow, like it came from a script. Or worse, when you try to speak your truth and realize you don't even know what it sounds like anymore. This glitch isn't about sound. It's about disconnection. Somewhere along the line, your voice stopped belonging entirely to you. It became a tool, a mask, a negotiation. You learned to say what wouldn't upset others. You learned to soften truth into suggestion. You learned silence when silence was safer. And bit by bit, the soul's native frequency faded. In dreams, the glitch becomes visible. You may find yourself in a crowd trying to scream, but nothing comes out. Or you speak and people look through you. Or worse, your words pour out, but they belong to someone else. You're speaking as a parent, as a boss, as a child desperate to be understood. You play roles so deeply ingrained, you forgot they weren't yours to begin with. But then, once in a while, the voice returns. A dream version of you walks through a fire and speaks one sentence with absolute clarity. A single phrase, resonant and true, shakes the walls. You wake up and remember the feeling, not just of power, but of presence. You felt yourself in your own voice again, whole, aligned, real. The glitch fades with awareness. It heals when you stop rehearsing your identity and start inhabiting it. When you say what your soul has been whispering for years, even if it trembles. When you stop explaining your feelings like a lawyer and start speaking them like a poet. When you allow your tone to reflect your inner world, not the expectations of those listening. Because your true voice doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't apologize for existing. It doesn't shape itself to be digestible. It just arrives, clear, strange, undeniable. So if you've forgotten how you sound when you're honest, listen to your dreams. They remember. They remember the voice that lived before the masks, before the compromise, before the silence. And they'll keep glitching through until you speak like someone who remembers what it feels like to mean every word. The soul fragmentation puzzle. You dream of being many people at once, not metaphorically, literally. You shift bodies mid-scene. You're watching yourself from the corner of the room. Then suddenly, you're inside the eyes of a stranger. A second later, you're a child, then an old man, then something in between. The story never stops, but the center of gravity keeps shifting. You wake up scattered, emotionally full, but unsure of who exactly was dreaming. This is the soul fragmentation puzzle, the disorienting sensation that your soul isn't moving through life as a single unified being, but as a collection of selves splintered across timelines, bodies, and experiences. In theory, we think of the soul as one whole thing, linear, intact. But some dreamers and mystics have long whispered another truth, that the soul can fracture, not break in pain, but split in function. That different versions of you can live in parallel. That every choice you don't make spawns a version of you who did. And those versions don't always stay quiet. Dreams become the meeting place. You speak in a voice that isn't yours. You see a scar on your arm that your waking body doesn't have. You cry for a loss you've never lived. It's not drama, it's data, a download from another fragment, another you with their own arc bleeding through the veil. The fragmentation isn't always traumatic. Sometimes it's strategic. The soul may split off aspects of itself to explore different possibilities, lessons, paths. A version of you that pursued art. A version that never left home. One that chose love. One that chose solitude. You don't consciously remember these lives, but they remember you. And when they do, the dreams come. You may sit at a table surrounded by strangers who somehow feel like family. They speak your thoughts before you can. They mourn things you've never lost. And you understand, without needing to be told, we are all pieces of the same origin. Each face, each voice, another limb of your own soul, stretched across lifetimes, like constellations across a shared sky. The puzzle deepens when fragments go unheard. When one version of you, trapped in an unlived life, begins to call louder. You feel it in your waking world as restlessness, unexplained grief, dreams that return with obsessive insistence. You try to rationalize it, but the truth is simpler, stranger. Part of you is trying to come home. Some traditions speak of soul retrieval, rituals that bring back lost pieces of the self scattered by trauma, exile, or denial. But the puzzle isn't just about loss. It's about reunion, about realizing that your soul has never been one flat identity, but a mosaic, unfinished, evolving, still learning how to become whole. And the dream is where you gather the pieces, not by force, but by presence. You welcome the child you abandoned, the version of you who never got to speak, the life you almost lived. You let them tell their story. You let them rest. And slowly, you begin to feel it. A settling, a recentering, not in ego, but in essence. You may never put the entire puzzle together. You may never remember every face, every name. But that's not the point. The point is to realize that you are not fragmented because you're broken. You are fragmented because you are vast. And the dream is simply reminding you how to carry all of yourself at once. The wrong era. Paradox. You wake up and everything is in place. Your room, your body, the year printed on your phone screen. But something feels wrong. Not tragic, not urgent, just misaligned, like a soft ache behind the ribs. You go about your day, but there's a whisper behind your thoughts. I don't belong to this time. You find yourself drawn to centuries you've never touched. You long for music that predates you. You grieve the loss of rituals you were never taught. This is the wrong era paradox. The eerie sense that your soul was born into a timeline it was never meant to inhabit. It starts small. You feel more alive in antique stores than shopping malls. You look at old black and white photos and feel the itch of memory, not from history books, but from inside. You hear a dialect, and something in your tongue stirs. You read letters from another century and weep, as if the ink was yours. You can't explain it, but you don't need to. The paradox isn't intellectual, it's somatic. Your body reacts before your thoughts do. In dreams, it becomes vivid. You live entire lives in eras long gone. You speak languages you've never learned. You navigate cities that no longer exist. You wake with dirt from another century in your hands, or so it feels. And for a few hours after, this world seems pale in comparison, like a copy of a place you actually lived. This paradox doesn't come from boredom with modern life. It's deeper. It's existential. The clothes don't fit. The sounds don't soothe. The pace exhausts. You try to love the era you're in, but the love feels performative, because something inside keeps looking back, not out of nostalgia, but out of recognition. But why would the soul end up in the wrong time? Some suggest it's not wrong. It's interrupted. You were meant for another age, but something rerouted you. A karmic contract. A soul you agreed to follow. A ripple in time that needed healing. And your presence here, misplaced as it feels, was part of the response. Others say it's on purpose, that being born in the wrong time is a kind of spiritual challenge, a test of adaptation, of memory, of patience. The soul remembers a time of alignment, of resonance, and now must learn to carry that inner knowing into a world that no longer mirrors it. But the hardest part isn't the longing. It's the invisibility, because no one else sees it. You speak of old traditions and get polite nods. You play the music of your heart, and the room goes quiet. You mention a past life, and the conversation moves on. You're not just out of place. You're alone in your remembering. And yet, in dreams, others sometimes find you. You meet companions who speak the same old truths. You walk roads that feel familiar beneath unfamiliar moons. And something in you lifts, not because you've escaped your era, but because, briefly, you weren't the only one who remembered. That's the gift hidden in the paradox. You may never belong to this era, but your presence here makes it deeper. You carry forgotten frequencies. You speak languages no longer spoken, but still felt. You are a bridge, not between past and present, but between soul memory and soul amnesia, between what was sacred and what could be again. So if the world feels too loud, too fast, too hollow, pause. Close your eyes. Let the dream return, not to escape the era you're in, but to remind it that something older still breathes here, through you. The reincarnation. Burnout. You wake up not with fear, not with sadness, but with a kind of soul-level fatigue. The day hasn't begun, but you're already tired, not physically, not emotionally, but in a way that makes no sense at all. Like you've been alive for far too long. Like you've seen too many sunrises through too many eyes. This is the reincarnation burnout. The quiet, often invisible exhaustion that comes from living too many lives without enough rest between them. You don't remember most of them, of course, but your dreams hint at the accumulation. Century after century, role after role, you dream of being the peasant, the warrior, the priest, the midwife, the child who never made it past 10. The lives come fast. Some overlap, some blur. And you wake up feeling heavy, not because any one dream was dark, but because the sheer weight of continuity is pressing down. This is a different kind of burnout. It's not about overworking in this life. It's about carrying the residue of lifetimes where you never got a chance to stop, to breathe, to reset, where you died mid-struggle, only to reincarnate directly back into another round. No time to integrate, no space to reflect. Just more doing, more trying, more being. Some people feel this early in life. Children who act old before their time. Teenagers who are already weary. Adults who feel like they've lived 5 lifetimes by the time they reach 30. It's not psychological. It's not personality. It's soul history bleeding through. In dreams, the fatigue takes shape. You try to run, but your legs won't move. You try to speak, but the words are already old. You try to start something new, but everything around you is crumbling, or worse, repeating. Like you've done it before. Like you're trapped in an eternal return. You may even dream of asking to stop, to rest. You speak to unseen beings, guides, gatekeepers, administrators of incarnation, and plead, not again. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they smile gently and say, one more, and you wake, aching. This isn't self-pity. It's not escapism. It's recognition that perhaps the soul has limits, not fixed ones, but thresholds, And when those thresholds are passed too many times, without pause, the soul starts to dim. Not in essence, in will. You start to lose your why. Not out of despair, but from exhaustion of repetition. You've been the teacher, the student, the rebel, the healer. You've played the roles, learned the lessons, and still you're back. Again. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still dreaming. So the question becomes, how do you live with reincarnation burnout? Not by escaping life, but by living it differently, more slowly, more gently, by refusing to chase every lesson, by resting when the soul says rest, even when the world says run, by honoring the part of you that no longer wants to be reborn, just to be busy. Sometimes, the most radical act for a soul like yours isn't doing more. It's remembering how to be still, to watch the sunrise not as a beginning, but as a moment, to let this life be quieter than the last, to let the soul digest itself before taking on another chapter. And maybe, just maybe, when this life ends, you'll be given a different choice, not a rebirth, but a season of silence, a garden to walk through without a name, a pause between heartbeats that stretches into peace. So if you feel weary in ways no one else understands, trust that. It's not your body. It's your soul, whispering, I've come so far. Please, let me breathe. The mirror personality effect. You meet someone, and instantly, without reason, you react. Maybe you dislike them. Maybe you admire them. Maybe they make your skin crawl or your heart race. But as the days pass, you begin to see something odd. The traits that spark such a strong reaction are yours. Their confidence mirrors your hidden arrogance. Their hesitation reflects your own quiet doubt. Their kindness feels familiar. Their rage feels like a memory. This is the mirror personality effect, the uncanny phenomenon where the people who impact us most across lifetimes and dreams are often reflecting ourselves back to us in the clearest and most uncomfortable ways. In dreams, this effect is magnified. You might argue with someone who looks nothing like you, but you say the same words at the same time. You're in conflict, but you feel the fight pulling from within, not between. Or you fall in love with a person who feels uncannily synchronized to your internal rhythm. And when they speak, it's as if your soul is answering itself. These aren't just symbols. They're mirrors. Not metaphorical, but energetic. You've met them before. Maybe not in this life. Maybe not in any one specific timeline. But the resonance is unmistakable. In some dreams, the other character becomes you mid-scene. You speak from their mouth. You move in their body. And you wake, disoriented. Not from the shift, but from the recognition. That was me. The mirror personality effect suggests that reincarnation may not only be about moving through different lives, but through versions of yourself that you refused to fully meet. And sometimes, those versions appear as other people, not to confuse you, but to show you what still needs to be claimed. The ones who bother you most might be reflecting the parts you abandoned, the ambition you buried, the selfishness you won't admit, the vulnerability you locked away. And the ones you admire? They might be versions of you you're still growing into, unclaimed strengths, dormant courage. And here's the twist. These mirrors don't stop at waking life. They follow you into dreams, Your subconscious doesn't waste time with strangers. It populates your dreamscape with reflections of unresolved dynamics, of hidden selves, of echoes from lives where you and this other were one. You may dream of someone you hate, only to see yourself through their eyes. You may embrace someone who changes form mid-dream, revealing the younger you, the older you, the other you. And in that moment, the divide collapses. You're not dreaming of another. You're reuniting with a piece of yourself. But beware, these mirrors can distort too. Sometimes what you see is exaggerated, amplified. It's not meant to mislead you. It's meant to amplify what you're resisting. So if someone in your dream feels too intense, too cruel, too tender, too wise, ask not who they are. Ask, what part of me are they reflecting? Because the dream isn't showing you who to fight or follow. It's showing you who you are becoming. And when you wake from one of those dreams, rattled, moved, disturbed, don't chase the other figure. Don't overanalyze their face. Instead, turn inward. Hold the mirror still and say, I see you. Because the soul is not singular. It is a room of mirrors, and every person you meet, awake or asleep, might just be another version of you, trying to come home. The mapless return theory. You dream of being lost, not in a dramatic, panicked way, just adrift. You're walking through a place that feels almost familiar. You take turns as if you know where you're going, but every hallway leads somewhere unexpected. You open doors that look right, but reveal strangers. You try to retrace your steps, but the landscape shifts beneath your feet. You aren't afraid. You're just searching. This is the mapless return theory. The haunting idea that when the soul reincarnates, it doesn't always come back with a map. It comes back with only a feeling. You wake up from dreams like this with a quiet ache. Not confusion, not fear, just a sense of unfinished business. You know you've been somewhere, looking for something, someone, but no one ever arrives. You know you've returned. You just don't know where to. Some believe that when we reincarnate, the soul brings memories, lessons, fragments of truth, but not instructions, not coordinates. You arrive into this life carrying longing with no origin, talent with no teacher, wounds with no wounder. And the path forward? Blank. That's the paradox. You remember enough to feel the pull, but not enough to know why. So you walk. You search. You build a life from instincts that don't make sense in context. You long for a partner you haven't met. You gravitate toward skills you've never studied. You find yourself inexplicably drawn to cities, stories, art forms, or people that the world can't explain. But your soul can't ignore. The dream reinforces it. A recurring place. A temple you never reach. A house with rooms that keep rearranging. You aren't trapped. You're trying to return. But the way back isn't marked. Because the truth is, there is no map. Not in the way we want. There's no step-by-step reincarnational guide. No breadcrumb trail neatly scattered across decades. Only signs, symbols, hunches, threads of recognition scattered like stardust across the landscape of your days. This is why some people spend their entire lives chasing what feels like destiny, but never quite lands. Not because they're failing, but because they're remembering through fog, trying to trace a life their body doesn't recall, but their spirit can't forget. And sometimes you find it. A place, a person, a phrase that unlocks something ancient. And for a brief moment, everything aligns. The ache fades. The silence breaks. And you feel it. I'm close. But then the moment passes. The path disappears again. Not out of cruelty, out of design. Because perhaps the point of the mapless return isn't to find the old road. It's to rebuild it, to choose with conscious presence, to walk not where you've been told, but where your soul draws the line as you move. The map doesn't exist before the step. It's written beneath your feet. Dreams remind you of this, not by offering direction, but by highlighting the feeling of being slightly off track. They create tension not to disorient, but to awaken. To say, yes, you've been here before. But no, you've never been here like this. So if you feel like you're living a life slightly out of sync, like you were dropped into the wrong time, or walking toward a reunion that never happens, pause. Don't look for the map. Look for the rhythm, the resonance, the soul-level yes. Because the return isn't marked by roads. It's marked by remembrance. And sometimes the way back home is the way forward into something you must name for the very first time. The alien soul invasion. You dream of being surrounded by people you know, but something's off. Their eyes don't carry memory. Their voices are hollow. Their gestures slightly delayed, like actors in a role they haven't rehearsed. You try to speak, and the words feel unfamiliar in your own mouth. You look down at your hands and feel estranged from your body. The world looks like yours, but behind the scenes, something has shifted. This is the alien soul invasion, a chilling theory that not all souls incarnated here are from this world, or even from the same universal thread. We grow up assuming everyone around us is like us, that we're all spinning through lifetimes in the same cycle, earthborn, earthbound, evolving in tandem. But sometimes you meet someone, or are someone, who doesn't fit that story. You feel it, not in belief, in vibration, like they are running on a different frequency, like their soul didn't rise from this soil. Dreams begin to reflect this divide. You may see a version of yourself that doesn't breathe air, that doesn't walk, but hovers, that looks human, but doesn't feel human. Or you may encounter others, cold, watchful, curious, distant. They speak a language of precision, not emotion. They observe life like it's an experiment. And somehow, they are new here, not new in age, new in origin. These are what some traditions describe as foreign incarnates, souls who did not evolve through Earth's karmic loops, but entered from elsewhere, from other systems, other realities, some to assist, some to learn, some simply to experience the weight and density of being human for the first time. And when they arrive, they bring disruption. Not because they're evil, but because they don't carry the same resonance, the same collective memory. Their presence changes the emotional temperature of a room. They speak truth like formula. They love differently, curious, detached, or with overwhelming intensity. Their dreams are filled with architecture not built by human hands. Their sense of home is missing. You may be one of them. You may wake each day feeling like an intruder in your own life. Like the gravity here is too much. The language too blunt. The emotions too fast. You may have spent your childhood asking questions that made adults nervous. Not because you were precocious, but because your baseline perspective was never rooted in this timeline. The alien soul invasion isn't an attack. It's a collision of evolution. And it creates friction, resistance, misunderstanding. Not just between people, but within the self. Because these souls often forget where they came from. Reincarnation wipes memory, but not essence. And so they carry within them an ancient loneliness, a sense of being far from where they belong. Dreams are the only place where they sometimes remember. They dream of skies that pulse with strange colors, of civilizations that communicate in patterns, not words, of love that moves like shared light, not emotion. And when they wake, they weep, not from fear, but from homesickness they cannot name. And still, they are here. The invasion has already happened, but maybe it's not invasion at all. Maybe it's integration. Maybe Earth called these souls because its evolution needed an outside spark, a shift in the field, a frequency that would shake the old loops loose. So if you feel alien in this life, if your dreams take you far beyond stars, if your emotions don't match the people around you, if you look at the world and silently wonder, why does this feel so small? Know this: you're not broken. You're not lost. You just came from farther away than most. And Earth is still learning how to hold you. The shared soul paradox. You meet someone for the first time, and something deep inside you quiets, or stirs, or panics. You've never seen this person before, and yet you know them. Not like a past life memory, not like a soulmate cliché. It's deeper, stranger. Like the two of you are running the same operating system. Like your lives are not just connected, but overlapping. This is the shared soul paradox, the profound, often disorienting experience of meeting another human being who seems to carry a portion of your own soul. It's not romantic. It's not familial. It's not even comfortable. It's recognition, not of who they are, but of who you are when you are near them. You feel your voice shift, your emotions multiply, your dreams deepen. You begin to remember things you didn't live until you realize those weren't mine alone. In the dream space, the paradox intensifies. You become them mid-scene. You watch the same story from both sets of eyes. You feel their heartbreak like your own. You wake up unsure which body you were dreaming in, not because your mind was confused, but because the boundary between you and them was always thinner than you thought. The shared soul. Paradox suggests that reincarnation isn't always singular, that sometimes what we call a soul isn't a whole flame, but a spark from a greater fire, sent down in pieces, placed in multiple bodies across multiple timelines. Fractals, expressions, variants of the same essential consciousness. You and this other are not twins. You are facets. It doesn't mean your lives will be alike. One may suffer while the other thrives. One may awaken while the other sleeps. But when you meet, something aligns. You feel it in the silence between words, the unfinished sentences, the mirrors you don't mean to hold up. And it's not always harmonious. Sometimes, meeting another carrier of your soul triggers rejection. You see in them what you've disowned in yourself. You feel threatened, not by who they are, but by what they force you to remember. Some dreamers report recurring encounters with these soul twins. Sometimes they appear in the same form across lifetimes. Sometimes they shift bodies, names, faces, but the energy is unmistakable. They speak before you do. They finish your thoughts. They remind you of who you are beneath the self you perform. And sometimes they leave. Because shared doesn't mean permanent. Two pieces of the same soul might collide only briefly in one life, to ignite something, to close a loop, to awaken what had gone numb, then vanish, and you're left changed. Not everyone you love is part of your soul. Not everyone you fear isn't. The shared soul. Paradox isn't about comfort. It's about recognition. And once it happens, your sense of identity begins to unravel. You stop thinking of yourself as a fixed point. You start wondering, if this person and I are made of the same soul, then who am I alone? But maybe you were never meant to be alone in that way. Maybe the soul is not an individual flame. Maybe it's a constellation. And sometimes, in sleep or silence or a crowded room, you find one of your own stars staring back at you. And everything, just for a second, makes sense. The reincarnation exit. Lie. You have the dream again. This time, you're leaving. You're done. The cycle is over. A guide, a voice, a presence tells you, you've completed what you came to do. You feel the relief, the soft unraveling of tension that's been with you for lifetimes. You prepare to ascend, to dissolve, to disappear. But just as the dream begins to fade, there's a shift. A small detail changes. A phrase echoes back with new meaning. And suddenly, you realize you've been told this before. You didn't leave last time. You were recycled, rerouted, sent back. And you wake with a single chilling thought. What if I'm never getting out? This is the reincarnation exit lie. The idea that the soul is promised release, closure, or graduation from the reincarnation cycle, only to be sent back again and again under illusions of choice, unfinished business, or higher purpose. Not as punishment, but as part of a deeper, more disquieting system of spiritual inertia. In theory, reincarnation is about growth. The soul chooses to return, learns, evolves, moves closer to unity, enlightenment, or home. But what if beneath that story lies a loop so old, so intricate, that even your awareness of it is part of the trap? Dreams start to reflect this suspicion. You reach the end of a symbolic journey. Cross a bridge, board a ship, pass through a portal. And just as peace arrives, you're pulled back. Reset. Your feet touch earth again. Your name returns. You wake up in a hospital bed, or a cradle, or a city you've never seen, but feel bound to. The journey didn't end. it rebooted. Sometimes the lie is sweet. You're told you volunteered, that you chose to return to help others, to serve, to heal. And maybe you did. But then the dreams start carrying a tension, like a contract signed in a language you don't fully understand. A duty that no longer resonates. A cycle that feels more like obligation than evolution. And the worst part? You question your own questioning. Am I resisting growth? Am I being ungrateful? Am I arrogant for wanting to leave? The lie feeds on your doubt. Because the more you question your own readiness to exit, the more justification the system has to keep you circling. But what if the system isn't malicious? What if it's just self-sustaining? What if the soul gets stuck, not because of evil, but because of momentum? Because rebirth became habit, and habit became doctrine, and doctrine became reality. Some dreamers report glimpses beyond the system, moments when they saw through the grid, when the dream paused, frozen mid-scene, and they heard a voice, not in words, but in knowing. You are allowed to leave, but only if you truly believe you can. And therein lies the paradox. The exit is real, but so is the lie. Both exist simultaneously, and only a soul deeply, fearlessly conscious of itself can tell the difference. So what do? You start here. You question, not with bitterness, with clarity. You stop asking what lesson you've missed. You start asking who keeps writing the curriculum. You stop assuming suffering means progress. You stop assuming return means virtue. You sit with the possibility, both terrifying and liberating, that you don't have to come back. Not next time, not ever. And maybe, just maybe, that awareness is the key the system hopes you'll never find. The infinite loop. Hypothesis. You dream of your own death, not once, but many times. Different bodies, different endings, fire, water, silence. And each time, just as the light fades, it starts again. A cry, a breath, a new beginning. But the arc feels familiar. The story loops. The faces change, but the feeling remains. You wake up with the sense that you're not moving forward through lives. You're circling. Again and again. This is the infinite loop hypothesis. The unnerving possibility that reincarnation isn't a staircase upward, but a circuit, a wheel, a story your soul keeps telling itself without an ending. In ancient traditions, this idea was not unknown. Samsara, the wheel of becoming, birth, death, rebirth, again and again, until something breaks the cycle. But what if the cycle can't be broken? Or worse, what if the breaking was never the point? What if the soul keeps returning? Not because it must, not even because it chooses, but because it has no other frame of reference? The dream keeps offering clues. You meet people who look different each time, but act the same. You make the same mistake in different settings. You chase freedom, but the corridors always turn back on themselves. You find a door that seems new, only to realize it leads back to the place you started. And then, one night, you dream of a life you've already lived. Exactly. Word for word. Moment for moment. And you know it. Not just like a memory, but like a script you've memorized through performance. That's when the hypothesis begins to haunt you. What if I've lived this exact life before? Not metaphorically, literally. Same choices, same people, same thoughts, in the same order. Not because you're fated to, but because the loop requires it to maintain its integrity. And if that's true, is free will real? Is growth even possible? Or are you simply playing the role of growth to keep the illusion intact? It's tempting to resist this idea, to rebel, to prove the loop wrong. You change something big. You walk away from a path you once followed, and for a moment, it feels like you broke the cycle. But then the loop adapts. It incorporates your rebellion. It makes the deviation part of the script, like a program designed to adjust, to self-heal, to make even the glitch part of the flow. This is the dark genius of the loop. It doesn't trap you through force. It traps you through familiarity. The longer you circle, the more every choice begins to feel recycled. Every love, every grief, a variation on a theme. You start to wonder if your soul even knows what a linear story feels like, or if it's just spinning, hoping that this time it will mean something different. But maybe the loop isn't an enemy. Maybe it's a mirror. Maybe it keeps repeating because you haven't seen yourself clearly yet. Because until you do, the story has no reason to end. In dreams, sometimes, the loop opens. Not by breaking, but by becoming visible. You see the pattern. You see the way the same lesson keeps dressing in new clothes. And in that moment, you have a choice. Not to escape, but to witness. To meet the loop, not with resistance, but with awareness. And awareness is what the loop cannot digest. When you become truly conscious within the cycle, you stop being a character in the story. You become the reader, the observer, the presence behind the pattern. And then, only then, does something truly shift. Not because the loop ends, but because, finally, you do not confuse it for who you are. The ancestral soul merge. You have a dream, not of being someone else, but of being many people at once. A grandmother's eyes behind your own, a voice you've never used whispering prayers through your lips. You wake with aches in your joints that don't belong to you, emotions that feel inherited, not experienced. You're not just remembering your lineage, you're carrying it. This is the ancestral soul merge, the mysterious intertwining of reincarnation and bloodline, where your soul's path crosses, blends, and sometimes fuses with the spirits of those who came before you. We're taught to think of past lives and ancestry as separate threads, one tied to the soul, the other to the body. But what if they aren't parallel? What if they braid? What if you're not only reincarnating across timelines, but also within your own lineage? In many cultures, this idea isn't new. The ancestor who returns in the form of a newborn. The child who carries their great-grandmother's temper, walk, laugh. But the soul merge goes deeper. It's not just resemblance. It's convergence. At some point, the soul stops being entirely singular. It returns not as a stranger to the family line, but as a branch of its own root system. And you feel it in dreams. You might dream you're back in your childhood home, but it's not yours. It's your mother's childhood, or her mother's. You see events you never lived. You hold objects you never touched. But the grief, the fear, the choice, it feels like yours. You're not just dreaming for your ancestors. You're dreaming as them. And waking up with echoes you can't explain. Sometimes it shows up in waking life, too. A deep connection to family traditions you were never taught. A sudden urge to break a pattern of suffering that seems older than you. A resistance to becoming like someone in your bloodline, only to realize you already carry their rhythm, their pain, their unfinished story. The soul merge isn't possession. It's integration. It's the soul recognizing that the body it now inhabits was shaped by a lineage of decisions, traumas, longings, and stepping in not just to live its life, but to weave those threads into resolution. But here's the paradox. When you carry more than one soul fragment, the self begins to blur. You may wonder, which parts of me are mine? Which emotions are inherited? Which choices are truly free? And the dream doesn't answer. It simply mirrors. You see a version of yourself you don't recognize until they cry, and you feel the tears in your own chest. Healing, then, becomes a collective act. You break the cycle not just for yourself, but for the ancestors still living through you. You learn to forgive not just what was done to you, but what you once did, generations ago. Because maybe your soul and your great-grandfathers were never that far apart to begin with. Some believe this merge happens by design, that certain souls choose to reincarnate along a particular bloodline again and again to untangle what got stuck. Others believe it's the ancestors calling you back, asking, "Can you carry what we couldn't? Can you finish the story we abandoned?" And if you're reading this, maybe the answer is yes. So when the grief hits and it doesn't feel personal, when the joy feels deeper than your own victories, when your dreams echo with voices that don't belong to any character you've ever played, pause. You're not being haunted. You're being braided. This isn't just your life. It's a convergence, a returning, a soul remembering its roots, and finally, learning how to bloom through them, the dream-born identity. You have a recurring dream, but it's not like the others. You're not reliving a memory. You're not reenacting a story. You're becoming someone else, but not someone from your past, someone entirely new. They have a name, a way of speaking, a signature walk. And what's strange is how consistent they are. Night after night, you return to them, their world, their problems, their voice, until slowly you begin to ask, is this a dream I'm having, or a person I'm becoming? This is the dream-born identity, the phenomenon where a fully formed self begins to emerge not in waking life, but in the landscape of your dreams. They are not a mask, not a metaphor. They are real, in the way that dreams can be real. Vivid, emotionally coherent, hauntingly whole. And perhaps they are you. But not the you that walks through daylight. They're the version of you that never made it out of the dream space. A soul thread that splintered off. An identity nurtured in sleep, growing life after life behind the veil of waking memory. In the beginning, you write them off. Just a character. But over time, their presence deepens. You find yourself thinking their thoughts during the day. Their moods color yours. You miss people from their world. You feel homesick for cities you've never seen. You're not just dreaming. You're remembering another version of you who only exists when the eyes close. And then it gets stranger. You might walk past a mirror and expect to see their face. You speak a sentence aloud and realize that wasn't your cadence. You feel anger, grief, hunger that doesn't belong to your life story, but burns like it came from your own body. And the boundary between selves begins to dissolve. So, what is this identity? Is it a past life? A future self? A soul from another dimension borrowing your vessel? Or is it simply a dream grown too powerful to forget? Some mystics suggest that dream identities are not echoes of other lives, but anchors, points of soul exploration branching outward in sleep, testing versions of being, creating stories in parallel to your waking one. Most of these dissolve with the morning light, but some stay, some mature, some become you in ways you have never asked for, but can't undo. The dream-born identity challenges everything we believe about selfhood. It says, maybe you are not the dreamer. Maybe you are the dream. Or perhaps you are both, the dreamer and the dreamt, switching roles each night, never quite remembering who wrote which part. And there's a risk. You may start to prefer their world. You may long for their story more than your own. And slowly, waking life begins to feel like the dream. That's the moment to pause, to remember. The dream-born self isn't here to replace you. They are here to complete you, to show you the parts of yourself that can only emerge when logic is asleep, when boundaries are thin, when the soul is allowed to write in its native tongue, imagery, instinct, and story. So if you've built a second life in the dream world, if a name whispers itself to you at night, if a face greets you with silent recognition, if a voice inside says, "Don't forget who we are when we sleep," listen. That version of you is not a ghost, not fiction, not madness. They are a self born of the night, and sometimes the most important parts of you never wake up at all.